it's Tyler with Commander Paradise here. We're doing a solo episode this week. Ryan had to go on vacation with his girlfriend. So he's having a wonderful time in Paradise, so I'm on my lonesome this week. So I'm doing a deck tech for a pretty cool dude from Wilds of Eldraine Commander. He's like technically in the set boosters, I think. It's like a weird... They do that now. It's weird. But we're doing this guy. Brenard Ginger Sculptor. He's like this really weird commander. He's like a food commander, kinda. That's not how I built him. He's a golem commander. He's also really good with splicers. Splicers are like a really weird creature type that are from Phyrexia, where they ETB, they make a golem. And so this dude, and they're all unbanned. And so this dude can reanimate those splicers. He's also kind of a splicer himself, not in name. So the flavor is kind of weird because all the other splicers are Phyrexian, and now we got this gingerbread man splicer. But that's kind of sweet. I think it's kind of fun. So he's a pretty cool commander, and we're gonna talk about him. So let's go down to Moxfield. So here's our deck. As I said, he is cool with splicers and golems. So he says each creature you control that's a food or a golem gets +2/+2 and has trample. So if you can get food creatures or golems into play, they get +2/+2 and have trample, which is pretty good. Lord in the command zone in 3 colors is pretty sweet. And then he says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token copy of it, except for that creature is a 1/1 food golem artifact creature token in addition to its other types, and it has the food text of pay 2 life or pay 2, tap and sacrifice it to gain 3 life. So if a creature you control dies, he can turn it into a food golem. So you can turn it into a gingerbrute. He's the muffin man, the gingerbread man, which is pretty hilarious. And then the splicers are really interesting. It says when blade, so they all have this text. When it enters the battlefield, create a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian golem artifact creature token. All of them are Phyrexians. They've been eroded. So even if one like Master Splicer doesn't say, he's a human Phyrexian artificer now. Also, all the golems have been eroded to be Phyrexian. So if you want to throw in some Phyrexian synergy, you can. I didn't in this deck, but you totally can. And then a lot of them are lords that give an extra ability. So like Blade Splicer says golems you control at first strike. So all of your golems have first strike. So if you can turn all your non-golem creatures into golems, now all your creatures have first strike, which is pretty cool. You got Iktekik Salvager or Salvage Splicer. When it enters the battlefield, you make a golem. And then whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Iktekik and a +1/+1 counter on each golem you control. He's also a partner commander from Commander Legends. Pretty cool. From new Phyrexia, all will be one. You got Malkator. He's a Phyrexian elephant wizard, which is sweet. When he enters the battlefield, make a golem. At the beginning of your instep, if 3 or more artifacts enter the battlefield under your control this turn, create a 3/3 golem. So he can make more golems, which is pretty cool. He's cheap for this effect because he's a 3 mana 1/1, but he makes a 4/4, so it's kind of a 3 mana 4/4 in a way. Master Splicer, when he enters the battlefield, make a 3/3 golem, and then golems you control get +1/+1. Maul Splicer is pretty nuts. 7 mana, but when he enters the battlefield, you put 2 3/3s, and he said golems you control have trample. Censor Splicer makes a golem, gives all vigilance. Vital Splicer gets makes a golem and says pay 1, regenerate target golem you control, so you can regenerate all your tokens, which is pretty cool. So like if there's a board wipe, you can be like, okay, I want these splicers to stay around, I'll pay 3, and then all my other ones that aren't food tokens yet, they just become food tokens and they stick around, which is pretty decent. And Wing Splicer does flying, which is pretty cool. And then we also got a bunch of just golems because Bernard is a golem lord, so he's pretty good with just generic golems. So we got some. There's a lot more you can mix and match. I kind of narrowed it down to the best ones. But there are more that if you want to pick and choose. There is some notable exceptions. We'll talk about those later. So we got Ancestral Statue. When it enters the battlefield, return a non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. So when it enters the battlefield, you can return a Splicer to your hand and get another Golem. So it just lets you reuse a ETB effect, which is there's several in this deck, so it's pretty good. And it's a Golem, so it gets +2/+2 and trample, which applies to all of these, which is pretty good. And so there are infinite combos with this, like in an Animar kind of deck. I'm not running any of those in this deck. If you want to, you totally can. With white and green and blue, you can have artifact tutors. So like you definitely could make like a decent combo deck out of this. That's not what I did, but you can if you want. You got Ancient Stone Idol. It's a Eldrazi monument thing, a monument to Kozilek, whatever. 10 mana with flash. It costs 1 less for each attacking creature, and then it's a 12/12 trample, which is pretty sweet. When it dies, create a 6/12 artifact creature token with trample, and then when it dies, it also becomes a food. That's a 1/1, and when it dies, you make another 6/12. So it's pretty good. It costs a lot less, so they don't have to be attacking you. Any creatures that are attacking, you swing with 5. Someone's swinging with 5 creatures, or you swing with 5 creatures. Flash it out. It's pretty good. Awakened Amalgam is a 4 mana golem. It says its power and toughness are equal to the number of differently named lands you control. One thing to notice is that Brenard's ability says, except it's a 1/1 food golem artifact creature token. So when it brings the token back, so that will overrule Awakened Amalgam. So it will no longer have the power and toughness equal to lands ability. It will just be a 1/1. I still think it's worth it because, like, with the mana base in this deck, with 3 colors, you can have a bunch of different names. So this is just going to be like a big thing with trample for 4 mana, which is pretty decent. Bottle Golems, you know we had to do it. This is a reference to Bottle Gnomes, an old Magic card from Modern Horizons 2, and it's a 4 mana 3/3 with trample. And when it dies, you gain life equal to its power, which is okay, but just like a 4 mana 5/5 with trample, it's not bad. And then you can get it back and stuff, and it does all the other golem stuff. It can have first strike or double strike, all this stuff. Campus Guide is a 2 mana golem, which is pretty good because getting golems out early is decent. A lot of these other ones are pretty expensive, so a 2 mana one's cool. And you may search your library for a basic land, reveal it, then shuffle, put that card on top, so it replaces your next draw, but it color fixes you. Getting to 3 colors is super important to cast our commander, so it's pretty good. Cradle Clear Cutter is kind of like a Gaia's Cradle on a big golem. It's from Brothers War, so it's got prototype. 6 mana for a 3/6, so it's a good blocker, but you can tap it to add amount of green equal to its power, or you can pay 3 and prototype it, and then it's a 1/3. And so it either taps for 1, so it's a 3 mana dork, which is okay, but it's a 3 mana dork. With the commander out, it'll tap for 3 mana, so 3 for 3. Which is pretty good. Or you can just cast it for 6, and then we'll tap for 5 mana, which is also pretty good. It kind of replaces itself. And it's just a big golem. It's cool. Ginger Brute, you know we had to. He's the food golem. He's got haste. He's unblockable, so a good way to get damage in. We got Glass Dusk Hulk. This card's actually really cool. So he's got cycling. Just discard, draw a card, whatever. So if you need to in a pinch, you can. Then he's a 5 mana 3/4. Whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Glass Duck Hulk gets +1/+1 until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn, which is pretty sweet. So if you have basically every creature in this deck is either an artifact or it makes an artifact. So like you just play a creature and then this thing gets bigger and is unblockable. So a decent way to get damage in. Howling Golem. It's Howling Mine on a golem. So whenever it attacks or blocks, each player draws a card. Super fun casual card. It's in all the game night decks. And I think it's okay. It's okay card draw. It's a golem. It's a 4/4 or 4/5 with trample. It's good enough. If you don't like it, cut it. Replace it with something else. But I think I played with Howling Golem in random decks before, and it plays pretty good. Meteor Golem, just decent removal spell. It's expensive, but it's a 3/3. It's a golem. That 3 power will come up later, so it's important. It's pretty good. Phyrexian Triniform is expensive. It's a 9 mana 9/9, but when it dies, create 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. So it makes more golems when it dies. It's like a Worm Coil Engine kind of thing. And it's a 9/9 for 9. With Encores, you can pay 12 and yeet more back from your graveyard, which is cool. So this is one you don't want to exile from your graveyard. And then the Encore ability is pretty cool because so you make more and then you sacrifice them and you make more. It's just a really crazy card. It's 9 mana, so it's a lot. We came ramp pretty good in this deck, but we don't really have any way to like cheat this out, so it's gonna be pretty fair. It's just a fair 9 mana big thing, which is okay. But it does get +2/+2 and have trample as long as we have our commander, which is pretty sweet. Rootwire Amalgam is another prototype card from what's that called? Brothers War, and then you can pay 5 and sacrifice it to create an XX colorless golem artifact creature token where X is 3 times its power. It gains haste until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. So it's a 5 mana 5/5 with trample. Well, +2/+2. So it would be a 7/7 with trample, which is decent. You can pay 7 and make a 15/15 with trample and haste. And then you can do it again because you'll get it back with a commander. So it's pretty good. And it's only a 33-cent card for like a pretty big finisher. It's pretty cool. Soulless Jailer is a pretty cool stacks piece. It says permanent cards and graveyards can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. So it stops all the impulse draw stuff your opponents want to do, reanimation. Just a pretty good stacks effect. And it doesn't affect us because we exile it from the graveyard and then we make a token copy of it. So this doesn't affect us at all, and it's a golem, so it fits with the theme. Also, it's like a big removal target because it like shuts down your opponent's stuff, so they have to remove it to do their unfair stuff, and then so our other stuff kind of gets left unnoticed, which is pretty cool. It's only 2 mana. Splicer's Skill. This is a cute card from the first Modern Horizons. It's create a 3/3 golem artifact creature token, so it just makes a golem for 3 mana. But it's got splice onto instant or sorcery. Splice onto arcane was this weird thing from the original Kamigawa block, and it's kind of a bad mechanic. It's more just like a good pun because splice and splice, whatever. It's 3 mana, makes a golem. It's decent. You can replace it with a removal spell or something if you don't like it. Triplicate Titan is a 9 mana, kind of related to Phyrexian Triniform. I love Triplicate Titan. It's one of my favorite cards like ever. It's from the Osgir precon. It's a 9/9 with flying, vigilance, and trample, and when it dies, you create a 3/3 colorless artifact golem token with flying, one with trample, and one with vigilance. And so it's like a big chimera golem, and then it splits into 3 things, and the tokens are all the 3 things. It's really sweet. You can do it a couple times with our commander. Really sweet. And then it gets +2/+2. And it's just a big threat. It's just a big dumb. Here's a big dumb thing. It's just fun. So that's all our golems. Golem as a creature type is so weird. But all these are pretty good. They all do something synergistic in the deck. They're either big threats or to just punch our opponents, or they kind of help us. So it's actually pretty cool that there's some decently playable ones. Another thing you can do in this deck is you can blink. You can blink our splicers, and then there's some other artifacts that and stuff, creatures that care about stuff entering the battlefield. So you can do like Ephemerate, Ghostly Flicker, and Scroll Shift. Just 3 blink spells. You can have as much of a blink package as you want. I have 3, and you know they're just blink spells. You know what they do. Just exile target permanent and return it into play. Pretty good. For draw effects, I got 8, plus some more up in a different category. So we got Lochiel, Clockwork Scholar. It's a 3 mana Elephant Artificer, also from the Osgir precon. That precon was so good. It's a 2/4, so a decent blocker. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking artifact creatures you control. All of our golems are artifact creatures, so pretty good. Whenever one or more artifact creatures enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, so it's the white, draw 1 card a turn. Pretty good. I mean, drawing 1 extra card a turn is plenty. Just get it going, and then we have some burst draw effects later. Mold Drifter is really sweet in this deck because you can evoke it, and then when it dies, as long as we have our commander out, it immediately gets brought back as a token, and then we get to keep it. So it's a 1/1 flying golem with +2/+2 and all the other stuff. And then so you evoke it, and it draws 2 cards, and then when it dies, you immediately get to draw two more cards. So it's 3 mana, draw 4 cards, and keep the flyer around. Insane. You can run more evoke creatures. There's only 2 in this deck. The Modern Horizons 2 pitch elemental ones are really, really good, but they're more expensive, so I didn't want to run them. This deck is not that expensive. Most of the money in this is the mana base. It's at $264, $265. Most of that is the mana base because I put a bunch of fetch lands and stuff in here just to have nice mana. But if you want to run on budget mana base, this is like a $100 deck. We got Research Thief. It's a 5 mana artifact creature, Moonfolk Wizard with flash and flying. Whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So all of our golems are going to draw us cards. It's like a coastal piracy effect, but this thing also is flying, so it can trigger the flying effect or the card draw effect as well. We got a bunch of MDFCs in this deck. We only have 30 lands, but 5 MDFCs. So this one's Seagate Restoration. This is like a $20 card, so you can cut this and just replace it with a land or replace it with another draw effect, whatever. I like MDFCs a lot. They're very good because they're a card draw spell on the front. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus 1. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. For 7 mana, so it's super expensive. Or you could play the back. In the back, how do I flip this? The back enters the battlefield. You may pay 3 life. If you don't, enters the battlefield tapped. Pretty decent. Tamio's Logbook is a pretty cool artifact. It's 3 mana, and then it's got an ability that's 5 in a blue. So 6 mana, tap, draw a card, which is super expensive. But it says this ability costs 1 less to activate for each other artifact you control, and all of our golems are artifacts. So it's 1 mana, repeated draw is very, very powerful. That's a really good rate to always be able to draw a card. So it's pretty good. It's only 3 mana for that. So on the turn it comes out, you could potentially be 4 mana, draw a card, and then draw more later, which is pretty good. Sculptor Spy Network is pretty cool. It's 2 blue for an enchantment at the beginning of your upkeep. If you control another artifact, create a 1/1 colorless Sculptor artifact creature token with flying. So it makes more artifacts for us for all of our other artifact stuff. And then whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So you have to send them at different players, but it gives you 1. It gives you a flyer every turn, so eventually you'll be able to just start smacking dudes. And so you can draw up to 3 cards a turn with this, which is really, really good. And just getting a decent flyer every turn is pretty good. Thought Monitor is a 7 mana 2/2 flyer, which is super expensive, but it's got affinity for artifacts. And then when it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. So if we got enough golems out, this is 1 mana, draw 2, which is really good. Same with Thoughtcast. It's a sorcery with affinity for artifacts, 5 in a blue, and draw 2 cards. Affinity for artifacts is this spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. So as long as you got enough artifacts, you're golden. What else we got? So we got golems. Ramp package, nothing really insane. It's just kind of normal stuff. I put this in the wrong category. Let me fix that real fast. We got Arcane Signet, Birds of Paradise, and Noble Hierarch because they tap for our colors. And then a bunch of 2 mana ramp so we can get our commander out on turn 3, so we can get it out early. The only really notable ones are Guardian Idol, because it's a 2 mana rock that taps for a colorless, enters the battlefield tapped, but you can pay 2 and it becomes a 2/2 golem artifact creature token. So it becomes a golem in our mana base. Pretty cool. And a Solemn Simulacrum. I love this card. I run it in. I need like the barest amount of synergy to play this card. And it's a golem, so it's going to be in here. You know what it does. ETB, search for a basic, put it into play tapped. When it dies, you draw a card. One of the best cards of all time. It's kind of not as good anymore, but I still love it. I run it as much as I can. And then a bunch of 2 mana ramp. Whatever you want for your ramp package, you can do. This is just what I did. Just basic ramp stuff. I got like Rampant Growth, Farseek, 3 visits. But you could do more or less. You could do Cultivate. You can do more Artifact ramp if you want to do like Signets and stuff like that. I did a lot more land ramp in this deck because it's more permanent. It doesn't get Vandal Blast, doesn't get Artifact hated away. So yeah, but you can do whatever you want with your ramp stuff. However you build a ramp package, just do that in this deck. It's not there's not really that much synergistic ramp. Same with our removal and interaction. I got 14 removal pieces, including some board wipes. I got some MDFCs in there. Nothing really that crazy besides Foundation Breaker. It's an evoke creature. It's a 2/2. You can pay 1 in a blue and evoke it, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So it's a naturalized effect. So that's the normal rate. But with our commander out, we get to do that twice. So it's 2 mana, destroy 2 things, which is a really good rate. And then I got some board wipes. I got Organic Extinction, is a 10 mana sorcery, destroy all non-artifact creatures, but it's got Improvise. Improvise means that you can tap artifacts to pay for them. So we could tap all our golems, destroy all non-artifact creatures, keep all our golems, reanimate our golem creatures. It's pretty good. It's really good in any artifact creature deck. And then I got some counter spells to protect our stuff. I don't really like using counter spells for other stuff, and especially in a deck like this, I just care about protecting all my golems so I can kill with my golems. I don't care about stopping what my opponent does. Yeah, Swords to Plowshares, of course. Just whatever kind of removal package you want to run normally in a deck for whichever power level you need. Throw some free spells in here if you want. If not, run some bad removal. I don't care. Just run something. We're at 31 lands and then 4 MDFCs, which is pretty good. So in this, we got the Battle Bond lands. We got Spara's Headquarters, which is the Triome with all the land types from New Capenna. We got 3 fetch lands. We got a Fable Passage. I got bounce lands, the Ravnica bounce lands, like Azorius Chancery, Simic Growth Chamber, and the other one, whatever it is. And so it can bounce back my NBFCs back to my hand, which is just fun. And also I like those for mana fixing. I think they play pretty good. Got Inventor's Fair, which is at the beginning of it's a colorless land, taps for colorless. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain a life. We probably will. So it just gives a little bit of life gain every turn. Whatever, it's not that big a deal. Pay 4, sacrifice Inventor's Fair, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Activate this only if you control 3 or more artifacts. So that can tutor for card draw. That can tutor for just a big creature, a big finisher like Triplicate Titan. And it can tutor for some of our bombs, which is our last category. The bombs, these are the big cards that are going to give you overwhelming advantage and win you the game. We got Bronze Guardian. It's a 4 and a white for a golem, artifact creature. Double Strike and Ward 2, decent. Other artifacts you control have Ward 2, so all your artifacts, including non-golems, or non-artifact creatures. And it says, Bronze Guardian's power is equal to the number of artifacts you control. With our commander out, this has Trample as well, so this thing just is a big, bulky threat with Ward 2 and Double Strike, which is insane. Darksteel Splicer is a 6 and a white, so a 7 mana 1/1. This sounds really bad, but it has some really good text on it. Whenever it or another non-token Phyrexian enters the battlefield under your control, create X 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of opponents you have. So when it enters the battlefield, you make 3 golems, 3 3/3s, and it says golems you control have indestructible. And so if you're going to reanimate all your splicers are Phyrexians. You can blink it with your blink spells. You can do a bunch of stuff. So this card is really, really sweet. You got Elemental Bond. Whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. All of our golems are 3/3s. So whenever we play a Splicer, we're going to draw at least 1 card. And then all of our other golems are basically have 3 power, except for a couple. But if we have our commander out, it gives all of our golems +2/+2, and they definitely have 3 power. So this is one of the best card draw effects in the deck, because basically all of our creatures have power 3 or greater. So we're going to draw a bunch of cards, especially if we start flickering stuff, if we like loop stuff with our commander. It's pretty great. And then we got Karn Legacy Reforged. It's a 5 mana Karn, no longer a planeswalker from Aftermath. His power and toughness are equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. That does get canceled by the effect of our commander, but it says at the beginning of your upkeep, add colorless for each artifact you control. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells until end of turn. You don't lose this mana as steps and phases in. So as long as you have a bunch of artifacts, you're just gonna keep ramping out stuff, and it just lets you cheat mana. It's pretty good, and there's a lot of there's effects, and there's a lot. It helps you cast other golems basically, because all of our big creatures are artifact creatures. And there's some activated abilities as well. And then our last bomb is Shimmer Dragon. As long as you control 4 or more artifacts, it has hexproof. It's a 6 mana 5/6 flyer, so it's just a big freaking flyer, which is cool. And then you can tap 2 untap artifacts you control to draw a card. It's a repeatable card draw. We can tap our golems to draw cards. We can tap our mana rocks to draw cards if we have enough mana and we don't care. So it's just decent card draw. It's a big flyer with hexproof. It'll become a golem whenever it dies, and it's just really sweet. It's a very, very powerful card. And then we had one more. We have our utility category. So we got Bala Ged Recovery is an MDFC. It's just regrowth on a land for 3 mana. Super good. It's got a land on the back. Same with Glasspool Mimic. It's 3 mana for a clone of any creature I control. So we can become copies of our splicers and get more golems. We can do our big golems like a triplicate titan. It's just a pretty good effect. And it's a land if we don't need the clone effect. Knight of Sweet's Revenge. This is a new Woe Wilds of Eldraine card. So 3 and a green. When it enters the battlefield, create a food token for an enchantment. And then foods you control have tap, add, green. So when we get more foods out from our commander, it taps for green. And it gives us the food right away, so we can just start tapping. So it gives you mana right away. But then it's got a big overrun effect. You can pay 5 green and sacrifice it. Creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of foods you control. Activate only as a sorcery. So once all of our creatures have died in board wipes, or we've sacrificed them the Witch's Oven, which is also in this deck, it's a big overrun effect. And then once all of our, because if we have enough food, we also have a bunch of golems, so now all those golems have trample, and it'll just kind of, it's just a decent overrun effect. There's more efficient stuff you can run if you got more money, or if you want to be not as flavorful. That's up to you. I won't judge you. Then we got Urza, Prince of Krug, the rare Urza, 2 white and a blue for a 2/3. Artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. You can pay 6 and create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control, except it's a 1/1 soldier, in addition to its other types. So we can make copies of our golems. We can make copies of our splicers and make more golems when they're turned into food. And then it's also just a pretty good lord. It gives all of our creatures +2/+2. And then we got Witch's Oven, which is tap, sacrifice a creature, create a food token. So it's a good way to be like, okay, I need more golems. Let me sacrifice a splicer. It immediately reanimates as a token, and I get to get a food out of it for other stuff. And if its power and toughness is greater than 4, you make 2 food tokens, which is nice for a Knight of Sweet's Revenge. And that's basically it. That is our deck. You can change this around however you want. I just went with the Splicer and Golem route. I've play tested this deck a lot, and typically this is a kind of a slower deck, so this is definitely like a casual deck. Don't run this in some high power games. But if you're trying to just play some goofy golems, this is super fun. I was able to pretty regularly draw a bunch of cards, get a bunch of golems out, being able to flicker a golem and reanimate a golem, and then blocking with your splicers so they're immediately reanimated. It's pretty good. And yeah, it's just kind of fragile to exile removal, because if someone farewells you, that's kind of game over, unfortunately. But that's kind of what that card does. So hold up some of that interaction, and it's but besides that, it's pretty resilient. It just gets a bunch of creatures out and swings with them. So if you're in for a deck like that with some like really goofy flavor, I think it's a pretty cool deck. Notable excludes: I don't run Blightsteel Colossus or Darksteel Colossus. So Blightsteel Colossus is a 12 mana 11/11 with trample and infect. It has indestructible. If it would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal it and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. If you want to run this, you can. I don't think this deck, how I built it, ramps hard enough to be able to play this, and I have no ways to cheat it in play, so just be a fair Blightsteel Colossus. It's not really how you're supposed to play Blightsteel. You're supposed to cheat it into play somehow. But it is a golem, so it does get bigger, and it's got infect, so it can one-shot someone probably. I didn't put it in here. One, it's $25. For what? I don't have a way to cheat it into play. You can definitely build the deck to cheat it into play somehow. I just didn't do that. Same with Darksteel Colossus. And then also a important thing to know is Academy Manufactor. does not work in this deck. So Academy Manufactor isn't played in all clue, food, and treasure decks because it's a 3-mana artifact creature that says if you would create a food, a clue, or a treasure token, instead create one of each. That is a replacement effect. So with our commander, where it says if a creature would die, create, exile it, and make this type of food token, instead with the Academy Manufactor out, you're going to make a normal food, a clue, and a treasure. So it completely defeats the whole purpose of like the whole point of the commander. So don't run it in this deck. It just doesn't work. There's plenty of other decks you can run this in. This is not one of them. So yeah, that is Brenard Ginger Sculptor. I think it's a pretty cool deck. If you would play something different, if you would play a different card or something in here, you should comment and let me know. Let us know in the comments how you would build this. What would you do differently? This deck would run you $264 if you wanted to build it. A lot of that is the mana base. Most of the good cards are like this is about $100 deck, $110 card, $110 deck without all the expensive lands. You could definitely build a budget mana base and have it run for like maybe $20. So it's like a $130 deck. So if you're into that, or if you have all the pieces, or if your meta is cool with proxying, you can just print this. But yeah, definitely check it out. I think it's a pretty fun commander if you're into the flavor, no pun intended. And yeah, let me know what you think. Comment below. Let me know. And thanks for watching. So wherever you saw us or watch this or listen to this, we probably got content elsewhere. So if YouTube is more convenient for you, go check it out on YouTube. Or if Spotify is more convenient for you, we're probably on Spotify as well. And then also on TikTok, we post stuff there every day. We got daily TikTok content. So check us out and like and subscribe if you think this video is cool. Thanks for watching.